Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well this week. There's a few people just jumping in, so we'll give it another couple of minutes before we really get stuck in and get cracking. It's great to see some familiar faces and names who are back again, so thank you very much for joining us. To all the new subscribers and people that have signed up, hello and welcome to Venn's Marketing Collective. It's a community that we have built for dedicated marketing managers in the recruitment space, primarily focused, I guess, at the minute on B2B lead gen. And that is certainly the purpose of this series. We all know the market is tightening. A lot of consultants are struggling. The fish are not jumping into the boat, metaphorically, as much as they have been before. So definitely that hunger to go out and win that work and find those jobs is definitely harder than it has been. So that is why we launched this mini-series dedicated to B2B lead gen. A lot of the efforts, like we said, have been focused on candidate attraction and candidate acquisition, and now it is time to pivot and pivot hard, but that is difficult, and we all know that automation can help make that transition quicker. So that is the primary focus of what we will be running through today. So I am also joined today by a very special guest, Billy Davis from Bullhorn, who some of you may be familiar with from Build with Billy. He is not just an avatar, he's a real person, and he is here in the flesh. We've got time for loads of questions at the end. So please drop them in the chat as you're going through. You don't have to hold on to them. Drop them in the chat as you're going through and we will get round to answering them at the end. So just a quick recap on what we have covered before. So part one of this series was delivering effective content and content marketing and making sure we're producing content that converts to win those MQLs in the first place. Part two was unlocking the power of email marketing for client lead gen. So if you're not yet doing automation and you're not even getting started with emails, start there first. That's going to help you get your fundamentals in place. And then this session is all about how we can take it to the next level and maximizing your CRM data and using automation for client attraction. So Billy, do you want to introduce yourself for those that might not be familiar?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. So excited to be here. So I'm Billy Davis. My current role, I'm a enterprise customer success for automation, AI, and our talent platform product. Been doing the automation and kind of staffing side for a long time, going on almost 8 years now. So I came to Bullhorn about 3.5 years ago from the Herefish acquisition. I was actually the first full-time employee at Herefish. And I was a Herefish client even before then. And then actually I was doing some staffing automation on my own through APIs and things before any staffing automation technology existed. So I've been doing it for a while. As you can see, I've led over 300 implementations of automation and worked with over 1,000 clients. So a lot of best practices, a lot of experience and kind of seeing things that work, what don't work. And I like to try to get all that knowledge out of my head, kind of help to create some content for trainings, tutorials, best practices guides, things like that. I have an automation newsletter that is free, that just kind of disseminates some of those deep dives. And then I also do a staffing automation post every weekday on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm a huge fan anyway. I am subscribed to the newsletters, and the YouTube channel is fantastic. So definitely Meg is going to drop some of the links to all of these in the chat for us. So 100% go and subscribe. Yeah, definitely some valuable tips in there. So I guess some of you might already be using recruitment automation. Some of you might not be, and you are just trying to get your head around it all, and that is fine. We are here to cater for everybody, and there is tons you can do from a candidate perspective, but that is not why we're here today. Like I said before, the market has most definitely tightened. Consultants need to work harder to find leads and win new business. So this webinar series has come at the perfect time. We're here to talk about B2B lead gen, how to get the most out of your prospecting list and how to re-engage with lapsed clients. But job matching, candidate experience, contractor renewals, Billy has got loads and loads of stuff on this over on his YouTube channels and on the tutorial side of things. So definitely after this session, go and have a look at all the candidate stuff, because there is loads and loads you can do. But I guess if you are a little bit new to automation, or you've just maybe invested in an automation platform and you're just trying to get started with it, there is loads of things you can do to just get started, and hopefully this will help. So the recruitment automation process, I guess, first and foremost, can help increase productivity and improve that candidate experience and the sales experience for existing clients, new clients, and lapsed clients. So for recruiters, it can be things like texting candidates on their first day, adding tasks when contractors due to deployment, and making sure there are no missed opportunities and that new hires love you. From an ops perspective, maybe you're trying to sell this in to your leadership team and you need to win over your ops director. Automations can be used to clean up data, identifying gaps, and speeding up searches for consultants and things when they're looking for sales contacts that they want to prospect, or candidates that they need to find. But when it comes to marketing and winning clients, recruitment businesses should be using automation to send consistent branded comms, but most aren't maximising the opportunity to engage with the existing database for lead gen. So a lot of automation platforms have web page tracking, which is pretty cool, and that can enable you to set tasks. So let's say a lead or a lapsed client, they visit back on your website and they go to your exec search page, your service page on your exec search. You can set a trigger to notify a consultant or notify the admin team that lapsed client is actually actively looking at your services, and which consultant wouldn't want to pick up the phone and win that work and win that lead. So that again is just a really quick snapshot of one very simple automation you can set up that is straight away going to start engaging and giving your consultants warmer leads to go after. You're going to want one of your team to give them a call and seek out that opportunity. So yeah, it's easier and cheaper from a cost per acquisition perspective to sell to people who already know and trust your brand. I bet if you had a search through that database to pull that list of anybody that hasn't been contacted or hasn't had a record updated, in the last 6 months or 12 months or even beyond that, you would probably have a sizable list to go at for lead gen before you even start attracting new people. And that is certainly a good place to start. So we want to support the team, support the sales team with their processes so they can spend more time prospecting warm leads and less time cold calling or sending a million LinkedIn emails. Billy, do you want to run us through the fundamentals and foundations?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's important to remember too that, from an automation perspective, still the industry is very much so in kind of an early adopter phase. We see that from kind of our grid data and some of the market analysis that we do, kind of seeing, how things are going in the staffing automation space. So with that in mind, just wanted to provide some tips here that are really helpful as you're kind of getting automation off the ground, or just to build a strong foundation so you can drive better results and have greater success. So the first tip is around mapping your process from start to finish. Really crucial to understand your workflows, kind of through your entire life cycles, everything that's happening in your recruitment business. It's important to know what your process is, so obviously you can train and get your internal staff on board with what needs to be done. But then you can also identify opportunities to improve things. You can find gaps of experience of, where are things where someone might kind of slip through the cracks and not hear from you or kind of fall off, and then deploy automations to ensure that doesn't happen. And then, of course, as you're building more automations, it's really important to organize those so you don't have any overlapping or competing automations, and you can ensure that there's kind of consistency throughout everything that you're doing. The second piece is actually important for automation, but really important for any staffing technology in general, is just mastering the internal change management piece of getting your recruiters excited about it. I know Beth had a great question about something commonly we see where recruiters or consultants might want to kind of push back on change. There's a lot of things that you can do to make things improve and have your recruiters and consultants get excited about automation. One piece is just ensuring that you're almost deploying internal marketing around it. What is the tool? What is it doing? What is it not doing? So you can kind of solve some of those fears or anxieties up front. And then the other aspect that's really nice is, obviously there's high value activities that the recruiters and consultants want to do, and you want to enable them to do more of those things. So take away some things that are manual or tedious on their end, or things that they can't do at scale. Like one of my favorite examples of that would be, like think about every candidate that applies to a job or gets sent out to a client, right? Especially if you're doing that at scale with large volumes, it's impossible to manage that manually, and no recruiter will ever tell you that they can. So obviously it's a great opportunity for automation to come in and provide a better experience. The third tip is around kind of investing the right time and resources. So one of our best practices that see a lot of clients use is creating an automation committee. So pulling in your subject matter experts from your sales side, your operations, your IT, your marketing, all aspects of the business. Create a little committee for automation that meets regularly so you can prioritize use cases, ensure that you're spreading automation throughout the whole business, and then you're having consistent time, building that snowball and compound interest. The next one is near and dear to my heart, and anybody who has an ATS or CRM background, right? You all know that if you don't have automation in place, data quality is poor, especially if you have lots of records. So if you can improve data quality, you can do a lot of great things. It's a marketer's dream to have clean data, nice segmentation, nice journeys that are triggered off of things changing. So if you're able to improve your data quality, a lot of things become easier. And that flows nicely to the last tip as well, where, especially when you're thinking about an ROI, measuring revenue, efficiency, those types of things, you want to ensure that you're tracking, measuring, and reporting on what automation is doing, how it's impacting the business. And it's also a way that you can also get buy-in, right, from recruiters, your executive level. If you can track, measure, show the improvement that's happening, measure your satisfaction, see how things are engaging, things that you don't want happening. If you're reducing those numbers, that's great. So it all comes back from kind of an analytics and insights perspective, where you can really tie it all together and show how automation is really driving better outcomes for your business.
Amazing. Thank you. So I guess there's, like you said, there's so many places you can start from, like data hygiene automations. But I guess what I want to be able to give the team today is something that they can literally go away and just bolt on. So hopefully the work that they're already doing, if they have been following this webinar series from the beginning. So I guess, what does all of that mean in practice, and where should you start? And data hygiene is definitely a great place to start. Because like Billy said, it is a marketer's dream, and I completely echo that point. And if you're desperate for leads, and like I say, you've been following this series, then you should know by now it all kind of centers around content. So this, I guess, is an example of a journey. So you've got traffic coming in, they're engaging with your content. Hopefully you're doing some paid remarketing to push your services to drive inquiries. But ideally, you're using hero content to generate these MQLs. So you've got something high value that people are downloading in exchange for their email address. Or they're signing up to your newsletter because they're loving the stuff that you're putting out there and all the hard work that you're putting into your content strategy. What I want to talk about, I guess, in a little bit more detail is this email campaign and using automation to, like Billy mentioned, do email at scale. And instead of or the consultants having to email that piece of content out manually. How can we support that through automation? And equally pick up those engagements when people do engage with that content. How do we feed that back into consultants so they can follow up quicker and sort of qualify these leads for sales? Just a quick reminder on MQLs and SQLs, quite common language. An MQL is a marketing qualified lead, and an SQL is a sales qualified lead. So MQLs become SQLs after they have, I guess, completed a predefined set of criteria deemed as making them sales ready. Now this might be visiting various services pages, downloading multiple pieces of content, opening specific emails. What that criteria is, you can work out with your consultants. Again, getting buy-in is really, really important. If you're saying that they're sales ready because they've read a blog, but your consultants don't you're not speaking the same language and they don't see the value in speaking to someone that has only read a blog, they would want to speak to them after they've read 4 blogs or 5 blogs, or they've visited this service page. You need to make sure you're speaking their language and you guys are on the same page and recognizing the same buying signals. So like Billy said, involve them in the process. You'll get more buy-in, and then they are already bought in. They know what they're receiving, and they understand how engaged that prospect is and why they've received that notification or that reminder to reach out and speak to that prospect. So again, just a quick reminder on the content. If you're not using content to generate leads, then go back after this session, obviously, go back and check out the first one that we did. In short, you need powerful, relevant content targeted to really specific audience personas. Don't fall into the trap of generic fluffy marketing or salary guides that aren't founded in actual data, or salary guides that give you huge brackets and don't really tell you anything meaningful. Find out what your customer's biggest challenge or pain points are at the minute, and that might be something specific like expanding down the US coast or restructuring departments for efficiencies. And then produce content that speaks to those people specifically and that are going through that same problem and where your services can help. I guess that is the level of personalization that we want to get to. Just putting a first name on an irrelevant salary survey, yes, that is technically personalization, but it's not going to have the same impact of producing something that is going to speak to a really, really, really specific challenge or pain point. That's going to get you much more highly qualified and more relevant leads. So this, I guess, is our recipe for success. Recruitment agencies need to think about their value prop and how they're backing up what they're saying with their content. And before you can get started, really, you need to think about what data you have and what you want to get out of it. So here's a really, I guess, simplified recipe for success with MQLs. So you have got a list of people that have downloaded a report or a white paper or an ebook or salary survey maybe over the last however many years, could be 6 months, could be 3 years, but you've never added them to the database, or if you have added them to the database, you've never contacted them. I hear you, I see you, it's really common, we're here to help. This is a really, really good place to start. So find a way of, I guess, pinpointing all of those contacts and getting them in one centralized place. So ideally in your CRM somehow. And you want to try and segment that into business and personal email addresses. I am not going to use the word client and candidate, because if you work in the space of recruiting hiring managers, they can be both clients and candidates. So you obviously will place them, but if they're a marketing manager, for example, they will be the hiring manager for the more junior members of the marketing team. So don't assume that you know what they were looking for, but certainly business and personal email addresses is a pretty good way to divvy them up. Now, some of them will bounce, so there will be some data hygiene to consider. So think how you can figure that out. And obviously making sure we're not importing any duplicate records or trying to find duplicate records. But to be able to, I guess, send them out to your consultants, you need to know what that qualifying data needs to be. So that might be industry or specialism or geographical location. Think about how your desk is set up in your business and what information do they need to be able to qualify them and reach out to them or find them on LinkedIn. They're going to need more than a first name and a last name. So yeah, what information does the business need to be able to make sure they're passing them over to the right consultant and giving them the best experience? And then in terms of measuring success, Billy mentioned that, I guess, briefly before. This, I guess, recipe, we want to look at ultimately how many engaged contacts are we handing over to sales, how many of them are making it through to consultants, and then obviously what are they doing with that off the back of it to be able to track that through to revenue. We want to look at some softer metrics such as conversion rates, email open rates, and click-through rates at each stage of the journey that we're going to work through to test and learn at each stage and see where we can make improvements. And like Billy said before, you want to kind of look at the journey or the customer experience as a whole, and look at all the touch points and see where the gaps are and see where you can try and plug some of those gaps with automation to help move things along and make things more efficient. So this is an example of a workflow that we have done with a client that was in that exact scenario that I've just spelled out. So they had over 5,000 contacts sat in MailChimp. They use Bullhorn and they use Bullhorn Automation, but they had these 5,000 contacts sat in MailChimp because they are a really, really good business when it comes to data hygiene. They really segment their databases, and because they didn't know which community these contacts belong to, they didn't have anything other than a full name and an email address. They didn't want to just straight up add them into the CRM and end up with all these kind of seemingly random contacts floating around. But equally, that's a massively missed opportunity because there's 5,000 people sat there that have engaged with your business one way or another and have probably never heard from you since, and what a massively missed opportunity that is. So this is quite a complex workflow, and we broke this down into a couple of different automations inside Bullhorn to make things a little bit easier to manage and to sort of test and pick up different things. I actually have a little workaround for a couple of things in Bullhorn, but there's also some updates, I believe, that are coming soon. So I'll talk to you about that in a second. But yeah, so this workflow example, they have used a great call to action to get a download off the site. So the data that's captured was just a name and an email address. So we want to get those added into the CRM, but like this business said, they were like, well, we just don't want them going in there with all our other sales contacts. So that was the first challenge. It was like, right, how do we get around that? How do we get all these sales contacts into the CRM so that we can maximize the automation without the consultants finding them and then being frustrated that we've got like incomplete data in there, and some of the stuff is a required field, so they weren't actually able to manually add them without industries and things like that. So what we did is we set the status and we made a custom status as MQL. So instead of using the leads functionality, which doesn't currently work with Bullhorn Automation, or you can't get automations using the leads section in Bullhorn. But I believe, Billy, there's an update maybe coming soon.
Yeah, so leads is currently in development. Could be as soon as the next couple months, by end of year at the latest. So very exciting to bring automation to the lead entity.
Amazing. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that one. If it was something that you were thinking about, definitely, I'm super excited to see how that plays out and get my hands on it and see what we can do. So really excited for that. But in the meantime, something you can do is you can set a unique status. So most have like lapsed, do not contact, archived, or active. So we put everybody in and we just made another value for MQL. So that means that they weren't going to randomly come up in the searches that the consultants were running and when they're looking for people to prospect, but it meant that we could really easily use that as a field to trigger some automations. So we communicated that to the business, I guess, again, like Billy said, getting buy-in. We communicated that to the business and said, hey, look, these are going to be in the database. If you come across any that are set with this status, this is what it means. If you want to go fishing and you want to go and have a look through and see if there's any email addresses in there that take some value, that you want to try and prospect, absolutely go ahead. They are in there. But also don't be frustrated by them, because we're going through the process of qualifying them, and we will hand them out to you as soon as I guess they are ready and they are warm enough to be contacted. So the first trigger we had was to find these people. So there's an automation running to find all the people with this status that haven't had any activity previously. They've never been contacted, they've not had an email, anything like that. And we're going to pop them into a welcome series, basically. So that is going to start with a really nice welcome and an overview of the business. Because again, just because they've downloaded a report, it doesn't mean they know exactly who you are and all the markets that you operate in and all the services that you offer. So we want to start with a really nice welcome email that has a really short, snappy value prop in it, a quick summary of the services that you offer, and some really high value piece of content. So that could be a latest podcast, it could be a high value report. You want something that is going to be really relevant to the businesses that you're going after. And then following on from that, you might want to send them a service charter, again just going into a little bit more detail about the services that you offer. And then into case studies after that. So show proof, show some examples of the great work that you're doing and some of the results that you've got for your clients. And then after that, you want to send them monthly content. So again, like I said, it could be a latest report, blog, podcast, anything interesting, webinars, anything, the good stuff that you have going on. You want to make sure that is going on into a monthly cycle. So then there is another trigger and another automation that is set up off the back of that. So that is going to look in each of those emails and each of those 4 email automations for any kind of engagement. So if they click through to the services, if they click through to some of the case studies, if they click through to that engaged piece of content, as soon as they, I guess, show willing and they kind of show engagement with your business, we are then going to send a survey engagement, which I've not come across it on every automation platform, but it is something that Bullhorn Automation does, and it does really, really well. So the survey engagement it basically sends them an email, or it can send them a text message if you have their phone number. And it walks them through like a really easy to use quiz style survey where they can tell us a little bit more about themselves. So in the context of this workflow, we needed to know, I guess, what industry and what community they were, so that we could tag them up with the appropriate, I guess, category in the back end of the CRM. So we wrote a really well-versed marketing email that just said, hey, we've got loads of great stuff. We've got some fantastic communities for you to be a part of. Tell us a little bit more, and we'll make sure we put you in the right community, basically, so we can send you more relevant content and stuff that is going to be really informative. So again, you want to lead with that value prop, what's in it for them. If you're going to try and get more information out of them, they need to know why, and not just feel like they're going to get sold to straight away. So again, depending on which option they click, so let's say you've got 3 communities, you've got marketing community, a finance community, and an ops community, for example. If they select marketing, that's going to update that field in the CRM. So as soon as that field gets updated, there's another automation that kicks in, and it says, okay, amazing, these people have updated their communities, they've told us who they are and what they want to hear about. That then sets their status from MQL to active. So when I mentioned earlier about the buying signals and I guess what makes them sales ready, that was what we discussed with the business, and that's what they decided. Yep, they were like, as soon as we've got a community attached to them, we want to know who they are and we want them to go out to a consultant. So it's going to change that status from MQL to active. So they're going to start actively appearing in searches that consultants are running. But it also sent a notification through to the admin team to say, right, okay, this prospect is now sales ready. They've been already set to active, but you need to farm that out through whatever processes you have internally to make sure that goes to the right head of department or the right sales consultant for them to then follow up with. And I believe, Billy, you've actually got a whole nother step that you can use to take that to the next level.
Yeah, one of my favorite success stories was a client that did something very similar to this, where they created this kind of top of the funnel use case where they had some great value content dripping out, And then as someone, as a a sales prospect or former client engaged with that information, or they'd have a follow-up message go out, like you said, kind of qualifying, and making sure that it was kind of a qualified lead. But then taken to the next level, they sent a message inviting that person to book time on the consultant's calendar. And this agency, they used to have a cold call requirement that their consultants didn't really like too much. I think it was something like 75 cold call quota per week. And then after putting this in place, they were able to get rid of that quota, and they would get 25 to 30 inbound qualified leads booking time on their consultants' calendars every week. So it's created a really impactful change in the business. And most importantly, you got the consultants really excited because they no longer kind of had to do as many cold calls. They had a lot warmer kind of inbound leads coming in, which helped a variety of efficiencies and revenue numbers.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I think that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Just consultants coming in to just pre-booked diaries and never having to do any lead gen. And if that isn't going to help you get business buy-in, I actually don't know what is. But yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? And you mentioned again about ROI and I guess tracking success. And I think looking at this workflow when it's kind of broken down like this, you can set those KPIs that we talked about at each step. So for that welcome, series and engagement, well, I guess even before then, your first thing from your content campaign is how many of these MQLs are you adding to your CRM, right? That's the purpose of the content lead gen. So that's your first, I guess, KPI from your content marketing is how many of these statuses are we adding? How much new leads are we generating? And then for each of these emails, you want to be tracking open rates, engagement rates, click-through rates. You want to be testing them. Some of the things we talked about in the previous webinar was, how to A/B test things like that and how to test different engagement rates and what content works best. You will, evolve it, test and learn, and keep evolving it over time. Don't let it stagnate. And then obviously for each of those, how many of them are engaging, and if they're not engaging, why not? Is your value prop that valuable? Like, if there's only so many ways you can say the same thing. So if it's not working, then you need to try something different. And lean on your consultants for this. Like, you don't have to, come up with it in isolation in a dark room. They are pros with their outreach emails. It's what they literally do as a job. So ask a few of them, be like, can you send me some examples of the prospecting emails that have worked really, really well, and use that to try and replicate. Again, this is all about finding efficiencies and being able to replicate things at scale. When they're talking to consultants, when they're speaking to them on the phone, what language are they using when they're prospecting people? I think language, again, like we said in the content webinar, can be the biggest barrier to success. If you're not speaking the same language, if you're not saying the right things, whether it's over the phone or on email or in automation or in your marketing, it's never going to convert. So lean on your consultants to give you that example of and seeing them at their best, see how they speak to customers. Again, the survey engagement, all of this can be tracked in the automation platforms themselves. So you can see it every step, you can see it every email, how many opens, how many clicks. And then again, how many notifications are being sent to consultants for follow-up. And from that point, everything is tracked, and it's also tracked through to ROI. So again, you can then, correct me if I'm wrong, Billy, you can actually see like in a prospect's or in a sales contact's history, like every single step that they've taken right through to the revenue that gets attributed to it.
Yeah, and that's the power of having all that data come back into the one, source of truth. And having a CRM, ATS be the same thing, I see is really powerful from an insights analytics perspective. I love kind of the KPI you pulled out here, Steph, because you also have those like conversion funnels too. So one of the things you can tweak, right, to kind of make those better and increase those rates. Consistently experiment, track, iterate, and find out what works, and keep evolving, improving.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we touched on it. I touched on it a little bit about like getting business buy-in, and like you say, getting the pre-booked calendars is obviously the the golden thing to aspire to. But what other tips do you have?
Yeah, so I think and especially when kind of starting out, or even if you're trying to expand the use case of automation, converting your internal teams and getting them excited about automation works a lot better, as you can imagine, than forcing it on them and kind of dragging or pulling them through it, right? So it's, you'll find things go a lot easier when you're going downhill. So I'm trying to push your team uphill. So, have some suggestions here on things to do and things not to do, from my experience that I've seen work really well. So the first one is kind of explaining and showing what's in it for them. So I talk about this as kind of show and explain the why. So, why are we doing this? Why do we want to improve client and candidate experience? But then how is it going to help you as a recruiter / consultant? How's it going to make you more money? How's it going to make your job easier? Right? If you can do those two things and clearly show that to a recruiter, right, they're going to be totally on board. If you're going to make my job easier and make me more money and more commission, right, you're not going to have anybody who's going to resist that. What can be really helpful is starting with a small interested group. So if you want to kind of pilot, and then you can expand off of the success of that group, or, so if you have some tech savvy people that are interested, start where it's a little bit easier and kind of build some excitement within that group, report it out to the larger organization. And then you can really kind of get the FOMO starting, and then their whole organization will want to ensure that they get the nice shiny technology that's producing these great results. Another example that I've seen be really successful is giving users control. So, there's some things where you're not going to give them control of. If you're creating a consistent sales experience, a consistent candidate experience, the interviewing, the placement, you want to make sure you're standardizing that throughout the life cycle. But there's also a lot of automations you can do and make them optional. So like one of my favorite triggers to do that is you can have a note action be a trigger for an automation cadence. So you can allow recruiters to use that note action to trigger an automation if they want to, or if they don't want to. So like one of my favorite ones there was having an outbound call / automation note type. So that if you leave an outbound call, you could just log it as a regular outbound call and then no automation would happen. Or if you wanted some automation to happen, you could just leave that new note type that you just created, which would kick off a sequence of emails and touch points to try to get that person back in contact with the consultant. And in that way, you're not forcing them to do it, so that they can kind of opt into it. But then what becomes really powerful, especially from a track, measuring, and reporting perspective, you can start to see how many people are doing that, how often are they doing it, and then you can kind of compare and contrast some numbers. So in my staffing days, we kind of rolled something out similar, and then we noticed that recruiters that were doing and using the automations were making 30 to 40% more in commission because of the automations, which then of course got everybody really excited and on board with using those automations. And then the last thing you want to do is kind of focus on impactful quick wins. From an automation perspective, we try to make this a little bit easier, where we have a lot of blueprints for the kind of things in the life cycle that happen over and over again. So think of placements, interviews, job orders, those things that happen at scale and happen frequently, where if you improve it, if you make it more efficient, right, you're going to kind of get that compounding and get that quick win, kind of helping the business over and over again. And of course, that contrasts with the first don't start with overly complex automations, or like, for example, you might have some recruiters or consultants that want individualized sequences or automations for them. Definitely resist that, especially when you're starting out, because if you start with something complex, it's harder to build. It's more prone for mistakes, but then also you're not going to get as many kind of actions and people through that automation. So you're also losing from an effectiveness perspective. So you definitely want to start with kind of the simple, quick wins. And then if down the road, if you want to expand into more things, you have more experience under your belt to kind of get into that. The other component is you don't want to think of automation as a magic solution. So really, automation is an amplifier. So especially when you're thinking about it from a marketing and a process perspective, you want a strong foundation in place so that automation can amplify and make things better, provide a great experience, right? Reach more individuals, help your conversion rates, things like that. But if you put automation on broken process with poor data quality, you're going to have all sorts of issues. So don't think of automation as kind of a magic, I bought automation, I don't have to work in my business at all. Think about it as something that if you bolt on to a really strong content, process, and system, it can really amplify and drive incredible results. You want to make sure that you don't forget to internally market any of the changes and things that you're going kind of increasing with automation. Best way I've seen this done is to have basically like a weekly or bi-weekly automation, this little overview of what's recently gone out, what's working, what's next, kind of what's happening, so that everyone in the organization knows what's happening. They're up to date. They're not caught off guard, by a campaign. They can kind of keep an ear out and understand how things are going. And then lastly, being a former recruiter myself, very sympathetic to this. In staffing, things change all the time from a technology, from a process standpoint. So the change and process fatigue is really a real thing. So the more that things change, the more new technology comes in, the more you're asking of your recruiters to adapt and change. Like it's difficult. So you want to be kind of cognizant of that. You want to try to make things a little bit easier, smoother. Get their input. I feel like they're part of the process instead of you forcing them on them. But also understanding, lots of things change for them. So it can be very, very kind of anxiety producing if their whole world gets changed every 2 to 3 months. So you want to make sure you have some continuity, consistency, so you kind of drive best outcomes.
I agree with all of those points, Billy. Thank you.
And then lastly, just want to kind of point out again, kind of another kind of end destination, right? Of where you want to be able to land. And obviously it's a progress, it's a journey. So, every step that you take that's closer to this is better, but especially from a marketing, from a sales perspective, historically CRMs and ATSs usually weren't the same thing. So you have kind of disparate silos. Marketing's off on one wing, sales is off on another, recruitment's off on another, and you don't have this unified single source of truth, which can make things contentious, can make things difficult. So if you bring everything into one database, into one CRM, it unlocks a lot of powerful kind of insights, analytics, also makes the experience more consistent, because now you don't have to worry about kind of things competing with one another. And if something happens in one system, the other system not knowing if it happened or not. So you can create more consistency in your triggers and your follow-ups. But then also, from a marketing standpoint, it reduces your effort as well. So you can get rid of those import, export, CSV, kind of functionalities that are needed to try to pull in, who responded, who opened this from our campaign, bring it into the database so recruiters can see. Like, you can have all of that in one spot, all those things automated for you. And that's really kind of the ultimate way of where you want to drive, is that single source of truth, all of your technology and your process integrated in there, so that if it didn't happen, if it's not in the database, it didn't happen, you can trust the data. Everyone, from your sales, your recruiters are going to the database first instead of external sources, and you can drive better revenue, better efficiency.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's a really good point, actually, Billy. You mentioned about like having CRM separate ATSs and like everybody being off doing different things. And I think especially something that I guess we promote a lot of Venn is like trying to, I guess, dispel the myth of like client versus candidates, because nearly all of my clients operate in that like hiring manager space where they're just customers, like whether they are looking to hire with you or they're going to look to make their next role, like make their next career move.
Yeah.
You can't like define someone by their job title and be like, oh, they're a marketing manager, so they're a candidate, or they're they're an entry level, so they can only be a candidate, or whatever. I think, like you say, having that single source of truth just means that actually you can easily dip in and be like, okay, we know we have a pool of hiring managers. How many of them, that we placed 6 months ago, how many of them are now actually hiring and building out their own teams?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I know we've had a couple of questions